invite you to turn to page 278 for a moment. There's a part of Jewish ritual that is probably pretty unfamiliar to most of us here on the terrace, but we're going to do it together. It just involves some words and some counting. And if you're not a good math student, you're okay. It's still in double digits. I'll let you know when you can join in with me. Hineni mochan u'mizuman lekayem mitzvat aseh shel sfirat ha'omer. I am ready to fulfill the mitzvah of the counting, the Omer. I invite you to join with me. The blessing is a familiar blessing except up to the last few words. It's like the candle blessing, and it ends al sfirat ha'omer. It's here in Hebrew and transliteration. Join with me if you can, if you would. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. We praise you, Adonai, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to count the Omer. Hayom, shloshim v'teisha yom, shehem chamisha shavuot v'arba'a yamim la'omer. Today is the 39th day, which is 5 weeks and 4 days of the Omer. Now, in case you're wondering what is the Omer, you may close your prayer books and I'll tell you a little bit. The Omer is the period between Passover and Shavuot, literally from the second night of Passover, actually. It's a time that historically was marked agriculturally by harvests and offerings. The Omer period is named for a measure of barley that was cut, harvested, and brought to the priests in the temple in ancient Israel. On the second day of Passover, a Thanksgiving offering, this offering was brought, and it was the first thing done before the crops were consumed. The original Thanksgiving. Later, the historic journey of our Israelite ancestors is laid kind of like upon that agricultural history. If you read in Torah, it says you should bring this offering. Later, we connect it to history. Anyone know what history we mark from Passover to what, 49 days later? Anyone who was an adult b'nai mitzvah here with me knows. What's that? Getting the 10 Commandments on Shavuot. So we count the 49 days from the second day of Passover to Shavuot, which this year starts the eve of June 11th. And over time, the Omer period is marked by certain traditions. One of those traditions is to literally count every night, like we just did. So if you've done that for the first time, kind of cool. We literally count each night, the first night, the second night, the third night, up until Shavuot. Today, most of us are probably not farmers. I'm not sure anyone here is, maybe gardeners in our backyard. And the Omer period may seem to have little relevance, like why count the days, why go from one harvest to the next? But I believe it still stands as a time for meaning. For one, it reminds us of the physical and spiritual journey of our ancestors from Egypt to Sinai. They were slaves, they were freed, and then they come to covenant, the mountain. It's a time in which we see growth and transformation, and hey, today almost looks like summer in Chicago, right? So we could say from the beginning of maybe spring, maybe snow at Passover, into almost summer. And a time of learning and insight. And there's something else, which is really my favorite part of this period. It's a tradition, there's a tradition in this time to study Pirkei Avot. Literally the sayings of the fathers, we'll call them the sayings of the ancestors. Pirkei Avot is a section of the Mishnah, which was compiled around 217 CE. It's a collection of wise, pithy sayings of sages that span hundreds of years, but Rabbi Judah Hanasi, by Judah the Prince, put it together in the Mishnah. And each text is attributed to a particular sage, like many of you have heard of Hillel, for example. He's got a lot of text in here. And they're standalone pieces of ethical insight and wisdom. The rabbis write about our character and our behavior, how we should act in the world. In this day and age, we might call them life hacks, right? Those short little things that tell us how to get where we need to go. I don't know that Rabbi Judah Hanasi how he would have thought of the word life hacks, but there's a lot in our world he probably wouldn't have been able to connect to. And so in these days in which there's great complexity and great difficulty in figuring out how to navigate so much going on in our world, I'm going to share a few of my favorite pieces of Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot gives us ethical counsel for our lives and how we can engage in others with the world. And I don't know about you, but I could always use some sage advice about how to view the world and treat one another. So here are a few. If you want to study some more, join us tomorrow morning at 9:30 in the Perlman Sanctuary. First, in the realm of self-reflection and personal growth, we hear the words of Ben Zoma, who teaches, "Who is wise? One who learns from all people. Who is strong? One who controls their passions. Who is rich? Those who rejoice in what they have, who rejoice in their lot. Who is honorable? Those who honor others." We continue with the words of Joshua ben Prachya, who says, "Get yourself a teacher, acquire yourself a friend to learn with. And when you judge people, give them the benefit of the doubt." Certainly we could all hear that about 1,000,000 times. Just imagine our world if everyone judged, giving the benefit of the doubt first. 2, in the realm of how to see and be in our world, we're taught, Hillel teaches, do not separate yourself from the community. Do not be certain of yourself until the day you die. And do not judge another until you are in their position. So just like the benefit of the doubt, right? Unless you're in someone else's shoes. And as well, we're taught that if we learn from someone else a chapter, a piece of law, a verse, a saying, even a letter, we are obliged to honor them. Imagine this Shabbat, this weekend, if each of us went back to someone who taught us one letter, one word, one musical note, one teaching in any form of our lives, and we went back to them and we said thank you. Imagine the gratitude that could flow. And in the realm of how we treat others, one of my favorites is Hillel's teaching, which is to be of the disciples of Aaron. The rabbis teach that Aaron, Moses' brother, would go out of his way to go seek peace. He was what was called Ohev Shalom, a lover of peace. So if two people were fighting, he would go up to each of them and say, person A, person B wants to make amends with you. And he'd go to person B and say, person A wants to make amends with you, even if perhaps they didn't. He went out to create peace. He was a lover of peace. So Hillel teaches, be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing it, running after it, loving your fellow creatures and drawing them near to the Torah. And a great piece that I know I often need to hear, and I'm sure many of us do, from Shimon ben Elazar. Do not try to placate your friends at the height of their anger. Do not attempt to comfort them in the first shock of bereavement. Do not question their sincerity at the moment when they make a solemn promise. And do not be overeager to visit them in the hour of their disgrace. How hard is that? But how important. And back to Hillel, I leave you with, in a place where no one behaves like a human being, we must strive to be human. In other words, in a place when all bets are off and everyone is behaving horribly, it's on us. To not just try, but to strive to be human. So back to that counting. Some of us might say, well, what's the point of counting? One of my favorite verses in Psalms is from Psalm 90. It says, Limnot yamenu ken hodav v'navi levav chachma. Teach us to number, to count our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. The psalmist lifts up the idea of counting and making count. Numbering our days, making them count, aiming for wisdom. So here's where the counting and the learning of these days of the Omer come together, where they sync. We learn, we practice the learning. If we take these teachings of Pirkei Avot, even one or two, and bring them to our days, to our deeds and our words, indeed we can make them count and perhaps gain some wisdom. Never know. And if that seems like a momentous task, I leave you with the words of Rabbi Tarfon. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor. It is not up to you to complete the task, but but you're not free to abstain from it. Let us count. Let us look at the work before us, the large task, and let us start. One teaching, one piece, one expression of gratitude, one positive viewpoint toward another. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. We turn to page 282 and rise for Aleinu.